Yesterday we were discussing the different sharings of wool. Um, we said that raw material have a status of mukseh. The raw wool that you sheared directly from the animal. We are on 50A, and we had one of the opinions in the Gemara is that when you took the wool from the storage house where you plan on selling the wool, so then even if you used it before Shabbat to insulate the pot, the wool remains boxer because it's going right back, morning Adam. It's going right back to the storage house for sale. But if you designated that wool permanently, then it would lose the status of mukseh because it's no longer mukseh. But what about wool that's not from the storage house? Wool that you sheared off the animal and you went ahead and you used it for the insulation. One time, use it for insulation. What would be the status of that wool? Would that now be not mukseh? Morning, Adam. Thank God the computer is working, Adam. And will it be considered muksa or not? So the halacha, so we had two opinions in the Gemara, right? Rava, one opinion in the Gemara was that you have to designate it for permanent use as insulator, also retains the status of muksa. Second opinion is you only need to designate it permanently is only if you took it from the storage house. If you did not take the wool from the storage house, it does not need permanent designation for an insulator. Just the fact that you used it for an insulator once would seem to be good enough. So in the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Nun Tes, so if we open up there, Reish Nun Tes Sif Aleph, I'm just going to read from the Shulchan Aruch. He opens up at the Muchen, which the Muchen is like cotton, or extremely soft pieces from the animal. That if there the Shulchan Aruch says we're going to see a difference between shearings of wool and cotton, different type of that cotton or specific type of shearings of wool. He says the following: if you use the cotton temporarily, not permanently, to insulate a pot, that cotton would remain mukseh. But of course, if you designate it permanently for the purpose, it's not mukseh. But shearings of wool, which is not the cotton, it's a different type of material. Shearings of wool, that he says, um, he, he says this is not as it's not a type of it's not the same type of material as the cotton, and it's not as I would say important material as cotton. Cotton, let's say it's more likely it's standing more for garment use, more or because of its expense, it's a better material. So the fact that you went in and used it once, the cotton, for some other permitted act of insulating, it still retains its status of mukseh. However, these shearings of wool, and since they're not as important material like cotton, the fact that you used it even once, it would seem, would be sufficient. Um, and then it already loses its status of mukseh. But again, that's provided that these shearings of wool were not taken from the storage house where you're planning on selling. So that would be Um, that should be the halacha. And then in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Ches, Sif Ches, discusses the following. It says things that some things that we spoke about yesterday. Shin Ches Sif Chaf. Shin Ches Sif Chaf. Where we spoke about the wood, right? The hard wood, the palm branches that were hard, that the leaves already fell off, that they're generally used for mukset, for wood purposes, right? If you cut it for wood purposes, we said that is mukset. But now then the Gemara said, how could you remove the status of mukseh from those pieces of wood, right? The wood is, and if you want to send through that we're on, the wood is standing for firewood, right? I mean, the fact that you could use wood for furniture, for chairs, but you cut the wood here specifically for the purpose of firewood, so they are muktzah, right? Now the question is, what needs to be done to remove them from the status of muktzah, right? That was the question we had yesterday in the Gemara. And we had many different opinions in the Gemara. One opinion says you got to do an action. You got to tie the wood together. By tying the wood together, that will do the trick. And no longer muktzeh. Meaning that seems to be the most strictest opinion.
But by actually
doing an action,
as in not only relying on your
thought. Right. It's not about your thought. Your thought wouldn't be good enough. Thinking I'm going to use this as a chair now, as a cushion, is not good enough. The wood, who had a status of standing for burning wood, you have to do something in the wood that shows that if you look at the wood, I see that this wood is no longer standing for mukseh purposes. I did an action. Is that clear, Ralph? I tied the wood together. Now I have a chair. Now I have a cushion. That is one opinion of the Gemara. But the other opinion of the Gemara says you don't need to do that. You have to have in mind, I'm going to use it as a cushion. Having in mind that I'm designating it for it is good enough. And then the third opinion was, which said that if you sat on it before Shabbat, you didn't do an action, you didn't tie the wood together, you sat on it, even if you did not tie it, and even though you did not designate it, you did not say, I'm sitting on it now, and that I'm making this now permanently a chair. But you did sit on it. That's enough. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch, the question was, that's how we're going to read the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, is that we see this from the Shulchan Aruch, that's the interpretation of the Gemara, because he says, these pieces of wood that were not tied together, that were cut for firewood, are mukseh, you're not allowed to move it, but if you sat on it before Shabbat, even a little bit, Adam, he sat for a few minutes on it before Shabbat, that sitting removes its status, because now you're showing it's a chair.
Right, so that's a different thing than preparing it. It seems that's a higher level. Like that would be even stricter, right?
Okay, so
I don't know which one's worth more, to be honest.
Right,
either way.
interest, right. So he says, if you sat on it before Shabbat, then you could sit on it and move it on Shabbat, the way the Chafetz Chaim explains. Okay. And certainly, so now he says, and certainly, Adam, if he tied it to sit on, which would definitely be much more a higher level of tying it because you actually did something in the item, or if he had in mind, so he's counting this, he's saying that this is a leniency because he's counting, and he says, or if you have in mind before Shabbat to sit on them.
That would be the most. So there's three.
So I'm not sure because he says that kosher came on the other two, and certainly the other two. So it sounds like this is the biggest leniency. The biggest leniency in the language of the Shulchan Aruch, from the fast reading, if you sat on it before Shabbat, even though you did not say I'm going to use it on Shabbat, even though you didn't say, you didn't do an action, you didn't change the way the wood looks.
Yeah.
You didn't have in mind, um, and you didn't say. See, here it says you sat on it before Shabbat. It says then you can sit on it on Shabbat. So let's see, the Chafetz Chaim says, let's see, even though you didn't think about it before Shabbat, just merely sitting on it shows you that it's standing for now for sitting, and the status of muksa has been removed.
So thinking about it is better than sitting on it.
So, it sounds like that's what it sounds like. That, but
you could sit on it in a more unintentional way.
Very good. Adam is saying, I could sit on something doesn't mean it still might have that old status. You sit on top of a car, it's not a chair. It doesn't become a chair because you sat on top of a car. It's not, its status is still a car. So you're saying a guy goes ahead and he sits on something, maybe it's not the common thing, and it's not the common, I mean, you didn't tie it together. Maybe people do sit on it, but you might say that you might not have looked at that as that maybe it's not a count, that might not count, right? You might have thought of it. I happened to sit on it, but it still didn't lose its status, right? That's what you're saying, and therefore that seems to be the novelty, that even I sat on it, even though I did not think about it before Shabbat, um, that I'm going to use it, um, just that I didn't think about using it as a bench. I just sat down. The sitting down is enough. And then he says, certainly if you tied it together to sit on, or you had a mind before Shabbat, you had a mind to use it to sit. I want to sit on it. And the Shulchan Aruch says that as long as I had a mind to sit on it, even if I had a mind to sit on it during the weekdays, that's good enough. I mean, I didn't have a mind to sit on necessarily on Shabbat. I had a mind, let's say on Friday and Thursday. I had a mind, I want to sit on this on Tuesday. Now already it became a chair, even though I didn't have a mind to sit on it on the Shabbat. But others disagree. It says you have to have a mind to sit on it on the Shabbat. But the bottom line is that would remove the status of mukseh. Now, but when it comes to stones, you were talking about door stoppers yesterday. Mark was talking about a stone. Like, how do you remove a stone from mukseh? So we're going to see that there's going to be a difference between the wood uh, pieces that people would use sometimes for chairs and sometimes for uh, fire, and and between that and stones, because um, stones and stones, the law would be, even though you had in mind, let's say stones that people use that's designated for building purposes, even if you had in mind before Shabbat, you know what, I want to use these stones as a chair. So it doesn't help unless the Shulchan Aruch says, the first opinion says, unless you organize them in a way that you did something, you actually had to move them in a certain way and set them up in a certain way. And the fact that you organize it, that's we will count that as a actual action, and you can move. Then it's not muksa anymore. Um, that seems to be one understanding. Um, One understanding. He says, and what's the difference between the stones and the wood? So the Chafetz Chaim says that the wood. Good morning, Asaf Boker Tov. The wood wood is a material that has multi-purpose, right? You can use wood for it, it, some people use it for sitting purposes. Some people use it for burning purposes. And your mind, what made these pieces of wood, this lulav, that palm spine to become mukseh, separated from you, was because your mind, because you had a mind when you cut it for the purpose of firewood. So your thought made this, your mindset, when you cut it, that your mindset, your machshava made it mukseh. So now your mindset, by having a mind that you plan on sitting on it, will remove the status of the mukseh.
That's how it became Mukseh to begin with.
Your mind,
That-
right?
that makes sense.
You made it mukseh by thinking about it to use it for a certain forbidden purpose, and now you undo it, so to speak, by having a mind to use it for what? For a permitted purpose, for cheer. But this thing of stones is talking about nobody, this type of stone that we're talking about, it's the general, it's not like it has multi-purpose. I mean, you have to make it into this multi-purpose point, meaning it's standing, this thing is standing for, um, this is the way it's used. It's used for building purposes. So there you have to do some sort of action to show, that it is for sitting purposes. Um, and this action it would be how you organize it. Therefore, he says, our wood, he says, that it's always standing for burning purposes. The type, the wood that when they cut the wood, we also need to do an action, like he says later on. It wouldn't help just designating it for this Shabbat. Designating for one Shabbat would not be good enough, and that's what he says later on. He says later on, you can't cover the opening of a barrel with a stone or a piece of wood, or to close the door, even though you had in mind before Shabbat. So having a stone, this would be the more practical case. I have a stone, or I take a piece of wood that's standing for burning purposes. Now I want to use it as a, what do you call it, door stop. I want to close the door with it. I want to put it against the door. I want to hold the door open, right? You ever see people take a stone, they want to hold the door open with a stone. Is that enough? And if I had in mind before Shabbat that I want to use a stone to hold open the door, so that's not enough unless I had in mind there. I had it to designated, but forever. Like if I have a permanent designation,
Not that you're going to use it this Shabbat.
this Shabbat will not be enough. I have to have permanent designation, because that's a much higher level. Because that's a higher level muksa. Because it's only stones are not used for permitted. The stones I'm separated from the stones. Um, Similar, the idea of the wood, because the wood is made for fire purposes. I gotta, how do I undo that status of made for fire purposes is now by designating forever for permitted purpose. Um, I think I think he talks about, let's say you take, you ever see cufflinks made out of buffalo nickels?
Mm-hmm.
So it was once mukseh, then nickel was a mukseh item. But now you did an action in the cufflink also to show that in the coin, it's no longer used as a coin. And not only that, I wonder the fact that you designate it now forever no longer to be used as a coin. So that should be that. It would seem like I would have to look more into that halacha. You could take an item that's mukseh, like that buffalo nickel, and now it's no longer being used as a buffalo nickel.
If you change it in a permanent way.
If you change it, right. So now the question is, do you need to do an action in the item or not? here it seems that designation, right? Designating the stones. We have to know. We have to look at the coin. They talk about the coin. Um, there, the buffalo nickel is not a problem as a cuffling. You ever see a buffalo nickel cuffling? Right? It's a nice cuffling, right, Ralph? You ever see the buffalo nickel? You never
No,
saw the buffalo nickel
no,
cuffling.
no.
You got to look it up one day, Ralph. You see the
I need all my nickels.
what?
I need all my nickels.
Right, right. But it's like an interesting thing because at least now silver went up, but silver used to be very inexpensive. So the buffalo nickels, they made buffalo nickels until in mid 30s, somewhere in the 30s, they stopped making buffalo
But
nickels.
they make it out of silver? Oh,
Buffalo was
yeah.
silver, yes. So it's a nice cuffling. Um, but when you think about cuffling, you could be thinking about this Gemara over here, But here, because he says you make the rock, if you permanently designate the rock for the door, then it's no longer mukseh. There you would need a um, there you would need the designation.
What happens if you later on get a doorstop and exchange it for the rock? How does that work?
Right. So okay. So now, if you took away from your original designation, originally you had in mind. You see, that's a good point. If you had in mind, I'm making the rock there just temporarily till I get that doorstop, but then it's not a permanent. That would not be sufficient. The rock would still be mukseh. But if you had in mind forever, I want to make it a work for the door. Now I got something to substitute it, and now I don't. Now most probably it loses its status, maybe because it's no longer standing for the doorstopper anymore. Maybe unless you say now it's still. What do you plan on doing with that rock? You're going to put it back. If the plan is that you're going to put the rock back into the street, then you have no use for it anymore. That's a good question, a good point. So these seems to be some of the. I wanted to get down to some of the halacha. Um, in the the interesting, he says the Ramah, the Ashkenaz rabbi, brings an opinion that says that the stones have the status like the lulav branches, meaning to say that there's a leniency by the stones that um, you don't have to do an action in the stones, right? What do we say about the wood of the tree? Said the wood of the tree or the wood of the palm branch, we said just either one of three. If one of three, it seems like one of three options. Either you tie the wood together, you have in mind before Shabbat to use it, or you actually used it before Shabbat as a chair. One of three things. Even if you didn't think about using it, you didn't designate it for that. You didn't have in mind to use it as a chair, but you did. The action is good enough. So there's an opinion in the Ashkenaz community that says we'll treat stones like that. So therefore, a one-time use of the stone before Shabbat, if you used it, you put the stone against the door before Shabbat, that should be enough according to that opinion. Or if you had a mind to use it for the Shabbat, would be enough that it's not mukseh. But others in the Ashkenaz community disagree with this leniency to treat the stone,
Like the wood.
like the wood. And some actually say because they hold we need permanent designation for the stone, and that seems to be the Chafetz Chaim seems to say that the other opinions seem to go with that opinion. So it would seem that certain items, like I would say the money is similar to the stone, you know, you would need some permanent designation to remove it from the status of mukseh. Okay, so let's continue in the Gemara. So now the Gemara says on Nun Amud Aleph 50a. Adam, is that a pretty? Hopefully, we did a little job on the halacha a little bit, Adam. Okay, I thought you would appreciate. Adam. I want to get down to a little. Maybe if you remind me, Asaf and Adam and Ralph, when Mark Adri comes, just review a little bit of these laws. Basically, good morning, Boker Tov. Basically, especially with the rock or these type of things that are more, you know, I can also see a piece of wood. People taking a piece of wood. You know, you have a piece. Especially people. You go to the country. There's wood around. People are using wood for fire purposes or whatever. Now you want to take that piece of wood. What do you need to do to that wood to be able to be used that wood on Shabbat? Because that piece of wood is mukseh, right? If it's standard wood that's standing for burning purposes, and that's what the Chafetz Chaim says, that wood that's standing for burning purposes, you would need that permanent designation. He says our wood that's standing for burning purposes, you also have to either do an action in the wood itself, right? Good morning, David. I wonder if you do an action in the wood itself, you write on the wood something. This wood becomes now a door stopper. It's a door stopper. Maybe wonder if that's enough to remove its status from, or just permanent designation. David, we were talking about a piece. You have a stone. You're in the country. You're in deal, and there's a stone, and the stones generally have no use for you on Shabbat. You don't use. It's not something you use. That you use. You separate it from using it. So a stone, I can't just pick up a stone on Shabbat, right? You want to throw a ball on Shabbat, right? Morning, Steve catches the ball. He knows how to catch. It looks like he knows how to catch, right? Yeah. But if you want to, then you have some little people want to play with little stones. Not light, not heavy. So we'll have a little toss with the stone. Nothing dangerous. I can't do that on Shabbat because the stone is a muksa item. I don't use stones generally. I'm separated from stones. What do I have to do with the stones, right? It's not something that I use. I use food, I use drink, I use other things. I don't use stones. So when Shabbat comes, I'm separated. It's not something that's on my table. You know what I'm saying? But now what about I want to have a catch? Steve wants to have a catch with somebody. He wants to pick up a stone from the ground. What can he do to make that stone not muksir before Shabbat to be able to have a little something with that stone on Shabbat? So if you designate that stone, say, you know what, this is going to be we're going to play with the stone. Sometimes there are certain games called like kugelach. Ever heard of kugelach? Morning. It's like you take like 5 little pieces and you throw it up, you catch it. You throw like this, and there's different ways that kids play with. So in Israel, it's a very common game. So I had to make a game from these little pieces of stone. What do I need to do before Shabbat to make this into my pieces, my marbles? Marbles made out of stone. Okay, you get the David. You get the story. Yolo. So now but these are stones. Now I want to turn them to marbles. Now if I go in and I do something, I form it, I shape it, I do something that's forming, that's shaping, that made now it looks like a marble. So it's no longer a stone. Or I did something in action in it, but that will remove its status. But there's another thing. If I now designate this, these are now toys. These are now marbles. I didn't do anything in it. But I had that mindset that I'm going to use as these became marbles. These are now a toy. I don't recommend playing with rocks. I don't think it's a good toy. But you understand, but people say this is going to be our thing. That permanent designation should remove its status of mokseh. And now this is something that's prepared for me to use. That seems to be based on our homework that we've been, our discussion, how you can actually remove something from the status of muktzeh. You can remove it.
That doesn't go for everything.
It could, I mean, it should go for a lot of things, meaning a lot of things. We mentioned the buffalo nickel.
Okay.
The buffalo nickel, now you use it as a cufflink. You've seen buffalo nickel cufflinks? Not too much, but not as popular. But there was nice. Maybe Steve has seen buffalo nickel cufflinks. Steve, have you seen that or not? It's a nice cufflink, but it's the actual buffalo nickel. I mean, they used actual real nickels. So now a person will say it's money. It's a muktzeh, right? So I would think, and we have to research it. Number one, you did an action in it showing it's no longer for money use. You made it into a buffalo cufflink. Or, I mean, it's like a funny thing on Shabbat. I have that, I'm using a buffalo nickel cufflink. I don't have one, by the way. But it's a little funny. But no, it's no longer buffalo. It's not used for money as a buffalo nickel for money. I did an action in it, and it could be if we designated it. See, we have to see more based on the Gemara. If I wouldn't do such an action, because a buffalo nickel, you have to go ahead and take the nickel and you attach it to something to make it into a cufflink. So that's a real action. You really change its look of the buffalo nickel. You're saying it's not money, but technically, if you cut off the silver or you cut off that piece, you got a buffalo nickel, Steve. You could just if you take the things that you connected to the buffalo nickel to make it into a cufflink, it still retains has its value. It could be as a coin. It's changed. So therefore, but it could be even. But we have to do more research. It's possible if I go in and I say I want to use a buffalo nickel, I'm designating the buffalo nickel for for the kids to play with. And again, I don't recommend, that's no longer going to be money used for money, or I'm going to use it in a permitted fashion forever, no longer as a coin. No, we have to figure out if it can be done. Because we have to see, but again, the story with the buffalo nickel, for sure, when you did an action in it, that changes the status.
It's not that you have to ruin it for its impermissible purpose. You just have to symbolically reframe. You don't know, but the stone or the nickel or whatever, you could always transfer it back. That's not what's required. Because you could say the nickel has to be ruined.
Right. It doesn't have to be. No, it doesn't have to be ruined. As long as you did an action in the item, that's good enough. Even though you could bring it back, but a stone, it seems that even though you didn't do an action in the item, I want to have a stone I want to keep the door open on Shabbat. So I want some fresh air. I have put a stone by right. So can I pick on Shabbat? I can't pick up a loose stone in the street and say, I'm going to it's Saturday afternoon. I want some nice breeze. I can't take a stone and put it in to hold the door open with the stone, because the stone is muktzeh. But if before Shabbat I took a stone, I was looking for a nice stone, and now I'm going to designate this stone as a door stopper, that seems to be good, as long as it's a permanent designation.
Oh, permanent.
It can't be that for Shabbat, because that right. That's what the halacha seems to say. Stones are much more separated from me. To remove its status of a stone has no use. It has to be one-time use is still not enough.
Just a stone. That's what's pretty much better. It's cone. And put it over there.
What say they take a what?
Street cone.
Yeah, but a street cone already had permitted use before. Maybe you weren't separated from it necessarily before Shabbat, because maybe the street cone you have in mind, you don't want people to walk on your house, and it might be the street cone might be already, it's usable. It's not like a stone has no. It's not people. You're not thinking about using a stone, and therefore a stone has much less use than a street cone.
Street cone has a use.
Has a use already. That's what I would think. If you want to play a game, right? You have a street cone is good for a base or something, or street cones have a use. You want your property and people not to walk or whatever. You don't want people driving onto your property or parking near your property on the Shabbat. So the street cone, I think, would be better. A street cone is not muksa to my in my what I would say. I don't think it's a muksa item. But stones stones generally have no use. It's just on the ground. They're pebbles on the ground, right? So that would be the. So I think we have to see. It's fascinating. I think we have to think about what we handle on Shabbat.
Yeah.
Right? Because the rabbis wanted us not to handle everything on Shabbat.
Right.
Because if you handle everything on Shabbat, so one idea is then Shabbat becomes like a regular weekday. You move everything. Everything is moved the same way I move things. So therefore, that's one of the reasons why the rabbis want us to take it easy on Shabbat. Don't be involved in everything on Shabbat. Don't be handling everything on Shabbat. Don't be like the Americans on Sunday that they're in the garage the whole day. They're not going to work, but they're moving around things. They're spending the day in the garage rearranging their utensils every Saturday, every Sunday. We don't want Shabbat to look like a Sunday in America in the garage. You know what I'm talking about? The garage story. Well, I'm in the garage today for a few hours. I'm not criticizing that, but that's not what Shabbat is supposed to. I'm not criticizing that people do that on Sunday. Maybe it's better than doing other things. But we have Shabbat as a day supposed to be more active and better things, not just moving things around like busy and that type of stuff. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. Thank you for joining. All the best, everybody. Yes, you too. To school and mitzvot. Ralph, take care. Asaf, have a great day. Morning, Levy.
I think someone grabbed it.
Take care, Ralph.
Yeah. They put it back. Yeah, I saw someone pick it. I don't know if they were learning. Back.
Okay.